They say you see your life flash before your eyes when you die. But what about when you're still very much alive? I saw mine today, on a projector screen, at my own funeral. My children, Michael and Sarah, stood at the front, dressed in black, accepting condolences, talking about her peaceful passing. I was sitting in the 5th row, in my best navy dress, watching them bury me. It's a strange thing hearing your own eulogy, knowing every word is a lie, feeling the cold air on your skin when everyone thinks you're gone. They truly believed I was dead, and in a way, maybe I am. To understand why my children were so comfortable standing at my casket, you have to understand the house they grew up in. This kitchen table, it's seen it all. It's been a battlefield for math homework, a surgery center for broken toys, and the place where we shared 1,000 Sunday roasts. When my husband, Arthur, passed away 20 years ago, people told me to sell the place. They said, "It's too big for one woman." But how do you sell the walls that hold the echoes of your children's first steps? I didn't sell. I worked. I took a job at the local laundry, standing on my feet until my ankles swelled like ripe melons. Then I'd come home and scrub this floor on my knees. I wanted Michael and Sarah to feel like their world hadn't changed, even if mine had fallen apart. Michael was my shadow, a quiet boy who used to tuck his head under my chin when he had a nightmare. "Don't ever leave me, Mom," he'd whisper, and I'd promise him with my whole heart that I'd be here as long as the stars were in the sky. Sarah was different, all sparks and ambition. She wanted the world, and I wanted to give it to her. I remember the year she wanted those designer boots for Christmas. I skipped my heart medication for 3 months to afford them. I didn't tell her that, of course. A mother's sacrifice isn't a bill you present to your children. It's a gift you bury in the backyard. We were happy. Or I was happy. I thought the love I was pouring into them was like a bank account, something I could draw from when I got old and my bones started to ache. I remember the day Michael got his first big city job. We celebrated right here with a store-bought cake. He hugged me so tight I couldn't breathe. "I'm going to take care of you, Mom," he said, "just like you took care of us." I believed him. Why wouldn't I? I'd raised a man of his word. But time is a funny thing. It doesn't change people overnight. It's more like a slow leak. One day you're the center of their universe, and the next you're just a Sunday afternoon phone call that they're too busy to take. The good times started to feel like old movies, flickering, grainy, and far away. They moved out, they got married, and slowly the house began to feel less like a home and more like a museum of people who didn't live here anymore. I didn't mind the silence at first. I told myself they were busy building their own lives. I was proud of them. I didn't realize that while I was busy being proud of them, they were busy deciding that I had become a burden. a piece of old furniture that didn't fit their new modern lives. It didn't happen all at once. Betrayal doesn't usually arrive with a shout. It comes in whispers and avoided eyes. It started with the safety talks. Michael and Sarah would sit on that sofa looking at me with those pitying eyes they thought were kind. "Mom, the stairs are getting dangerous," Michael would say, glancing at the banister I'd held onto for 30 years. Then came the help. My daughter-in-law, Brenda, started coming over to declutter. She'd bag up my old coats and my husband's books, saying they were just collecting dust. But that dust was all I had left of him. Every time a bag left this house, a piece of my breath went with it. I remember the Sunday dinner 6 months ago. I'd spent all morning making Michael's favorite lasagna. I'd even used the good china. They arrived 40 minutes late. Michael spent the whole meal checking his buzzing phone. Brenda spent it wiping the silverware with a wet nap, as if my kitchen wasn't clean enough for her. "Mom," Sarah said, picking at her food, "we've been talking. We think it's time you looked at assisted living. You know, a place with activities and doctors on site." I told them I wasn't going. I told them my heart was rooted in these floorboards. The room went cold. The silence wasn't the peaceful kind. It was the kind that precedes a storm. After that, the phone stopped ringing. When I'd call Michael, he'd say he was in a meeting. When I called Sarah, she'd tell me the kids had soccer and she'd call you right back. She never did. Then the small humiliations began. They changed my Netflix password because I didn't use it anyway. They stopped inviting me to the grandkids' school plays because it's too much walking for you, Mom. I found out through a neighbor that Michael had listed this house for sale. My house. He hadn't even told me. When I confronted him, he didn't apologize. He just looked at me like I was a difficult child. "We're doing this for your own good, Mom. You're not thinking clearly anymore." That was the first time he used that tone, the senile tone, the one that tells you your opinion no longer carries weight because your hair is white. They started talking over me as if I were a piece of furniture, discussing my bank accounts while I was sitting right there, talking about where my things would go. I felt myself disappearing. Every day they chipped away a little more of my dignity, a little more of my history. I wasn't a mother anymore. I was a problem to be solved, a line item on a budget that they wanted to erase. The cuts were small, but I was bleeding out. And then the ultimate silence fell. For 3 weeks, not a single word, no calls, no visits, just the mailman and the crows in the yard. Until I saw the notice in the local paper, a small black-bordered square that made the world tilt on its axis. It was an invitation to a memorial service. For me. I walked into that funeral parlor like a thief in the night. I didn't want to cause a scene. Not yet. I just wanted to see. I wanted to see what I was worth to them now that they thought I was silent. The room was filled with the soft murmur of people who hadn't called me in years, but there, in the center of the room, was the masterpiece of their lie, a beautiful closed casket draped in white roses. I watched Sarah stand up to give the eulogy. Her voice trembled perfectly. She talked about my final days and how I had slowly slipped away into a world of shadows. She was describing a woman who had lost her mind. She told the crowd that I didn't recognize her at the end, that I was gone long before my heart stopped. I stood in the shadows of the back row, my blood turning to ice. I wasn't gone. I had been sitting by my phone for 3 weeks. I had been clear-headed enough to feel every second of the loneliness they'd trapped me in. Then Michael stood up. He talked about the burden of care and how they had done everything to make my transition comfortable. That was when I realized the funeral wasn't for me. It was for them. It was a theater production to explain away why they were selling my house and moving me into a state-run facility without my consent. If the world thought I was dead, or as good as dead, no one would ask questions. No one would ask why the glue of the family was suddenly missing. I waited until the room went quiet for a moment of prayer. The silence was heavy, performative. I walked down the center aisle. My cane hit the carpet with a rhythmic thump, thump, thump. I saw Michael's face first. The color didn't just drain from him, it vanished. He looked like he had seen a demon. Sarah dropped her glass of water, the shatter echoing off the marble walls. "Mom?" she whispered, her voice cracking. I didn't stop until I was standing right next to the casket filled with rocks or whatever weight they'd put in there to make it heavy. I looked at the photo of myself, the one they'd chosen because I looked sweet and compliant. I turned to the room full of our friends and family. My voice didn't shake. It was the strongest it had been in years. I apologized for the intrusion, I said, looking Michael dead in the eye. But I believe there's been a mistake in the paperwork. I'm not quite ready for the dirt yet. The betrayal wasn't just that they wanted me gone. It was that they had murdered my character while I was still drawing breath. They had told everyone I was a hollow shell so they could pick my life clean like vultures. "Michael," I said, loud enough for the back row to hear, "you told these people I didn't recognize you, but I recognize you perfectly right now. I recognize a man who is more afraid of his mother's voice than her ghost." The room stayed silent. No one moved. In that moment, the accusation wasn't a shout. It was the simple, terrifying fact of my existence. I wasn't a memory. I was a witness. When Michael and Sarah burst through the front door an hour after the funeral, they weren't crying, they were sweating. They were looking for the folder, the one they thought held the deed to my life. "Mom, you don't understand," Michael said, his voice cracking with a desperate kind of greed. "We've already leveraged the house. We needed that money to cover the kids' tuition." I knew what he meant. He meant his gambling. He meant Sarah's failed boutique. They hadn't just tried to bury me. They had already spent my ghost. I let him search. I let him tear through the drawers I'd already emptied. And then I handed Michael a single yellowed envelope. "What's this?" he asked, his hands shaking. "The insurance policy?" "No," I said quietly. It's a receipt. 10 years ago, when their father died, I knew this day might come. I didn't want to believe it, but a mother knows her children's shadows before they do. I had sold the house back then to a private trust, a trust I created myself. The twist wasn't that I was rich. The twist was that I was already their landlord. Every month for 10 years, Michael had been helping me by managing my accounts. He thought he was skimming off the top of my savings. In reality, he was paying rent to a company he didn't know I owned. You didn't just try to bury a mother, I told them as they stood in the middle of the empty hallway. You tried to bury your owner. And the thing about being dead, Michael, is that dead people don't sign over checks. The moral victory wasn't just the money. It was the look on their faces when they realized that by killing me, they had legally severed themselves from the only thing keeping them afloat. In their haste to get rid of the burden, they had cut their own safety rope. People ask me if I hate them. How can you hate the hands you taught to tie shoelaces? How can you hate the voices that used to sing Happy Birthday in off-key whispers? I don't hate them. I've just closed the ledger. You see, we spend our whole lives teaching our children how to walk away from us. We celebrate their first steps, their first day of school, their first move. We train them for independence. But we forget to teach them that independence isn't the same as heartlessness. If you are a child with a living parent, hear me. Your inheritance isn't in a bank account. It isn't in a house or a piece of jewelry. Your inheritance is the time you have left to look them in the eye and say, I see you. Not as a mother, not as a provider, but as a person. And if you are a parent feeling the frost of being forgotten, listen to me closely. Do not set yourself on fire to keep them warm. They will only complain about the smoke. Your life is not a deposit for their future. Your life is yours. I am 82 years old. I have attended my own funeral. I have heard the lies told about my mind, and yet I have never felt more awake. I am moving into a house where the doors don't have locks because I have nothing left to steal. I am taking only my memories, the real ones, not the ones they tried to write for me. The final entry in my ledger doesn't have a $sign. It just says, free. Love is a gift. Respect is a requirement.